Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel to Only Movies, and today we are gonna be talking about we're watching a video that the Cosmic Wonder was talking about that Marvel is changing their plans. So Kevin Feige is gonna be talking about stuff that he had ideas, but Disney didn't want to. So even Wall Street was talking about. So we're gonna check this video out, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it, and we'll talk more about it because there's a lot to talk about this.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Cosmic Wonder. The Wall Street Journal just a very important article that I think every Marvel fan needs to hear what they said, because they talk about how Marvel Studios has just reevaluated everything that they have done basically over the past 5 years and have decided to completely switch up everything that they are doing. This article talks about how Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, was basically pressured by Disney to create streaming content. They talk about how he was spread way too thin, and many people working on shows and movies had to run in the hallways to try and find him to just get a second of his time so he could approve or disapprove or give his input on certain projects. They talk about how the people at Marvel Studios talked about Marvel and superhero fatigue. They talk about why they did everything they have done recently, including bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as Doctor Doom and make.
That's so true. I kind of felt like I've had a superhero fatigue. I've been kind of tired of the superhero already genre, due to because especially with Marvel was going through everything. I kind of understand why, but at the same time, it's like they force too much on they rely too much on the show. That's the thing.
They did everything they have done recently, including bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as Doctor Doom and making Avengers King Dynasty Avengers Doomsday. But most importantly, they talk about their plans moving forward. They acknowledge the issues of the past and are moving forward in a great way, and I think everybody needs to hear what is being said in this article. So let's go ahead and break it all down. The article itself is titled, "Disney Wanted More from Marvel, Now It Wants Less." The superhero studio is cutting back TV production and fixing its film slate after fans lost the plot. Now, right away, the article basically addresses and confirms what all of us fans thought all along. They state the head of Marvel Studios, speaking of Kevin Feige, told colleagues recently that watching all the comic book giants' new TV shows and films had started to feel more like homework than entertainment. The problem, Kevin Feige acknowledged, is that in an effort to satisfy parent company Disney's hunger for content on its new streaming service, the studio behind The Avengers churned out too many movies and shows with interconnected stories. The deluge of material from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, on Disney Plus overwhelmed and eventually alienated viewers. It also stretched Feige and his team's resources thin, diluting the quality of their output. Marvel's box office sales, streaming popularity, and formerly untouchable position in pop culture suffered. So, right away, Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, admits that watching everything kind of felt a little bit more like homework than entertainment, and confirmed what we all thought. Disney was pressuring Marvel Studios to simply just produce a bunch of content for Disney Plus, and naturally everything suffered for it. But here's the good news. They acknowledge this, and they are now getting back on track to try to get back to old school Marvel.
My opinion is that's what this is what me and my friend were talking about. That if they want to go back to old school Marvel, they need to do is rely just on their superhero, just their movies themselves, like Spider Man. How Sam Raimi did, he was focusing on just Spider Man, not worrying about there's any other superheroes and all this. Same with the X-Men, Blade, and all that. If they want to go back to the old school Marvel ways, unless they're talking about the from Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, but I say go back to the classic early 2000s Marvel. So like that, you could just focus on those main characters and just their story. They don't have to connect with everyone's, like, from, okay, we understand there's already superhero on the other in this world, no, in other cities and states and all. Just mainly focus on those stories on the superheroes.
They state now Feige is leading an internal overhaul aimed at getting the studio back on track. Marvel is making fewer TV shows with standalone stories that don't require prior knowledge of the MCU. Feige is focused on fixing the studio's movie slate following recent flops like February's Captain America Brave New World. So right away, they're making less TV shows, and it sounds like now, one, the TV shows aren't going to require any prior knowledge in the MCU, meaning you won't really have to watch anything beforehand. So this is a big switch up. If you didn't watch Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Age of Ultron, and other things prior to watching WandaVision, you probably wouldn't have too much of an idea of what's going on. The same thing went for The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or Loki. If you didn't watch things before, it would be really hard to really get into the shows. So Marvel is no longer going to make shows like that. They're going to make shows that you can watch one-off. And this most likely means that they won't have too many tie-ins to big events that are happening in the MCU overall. I'm sure some of them will, but it sounds like their goal is to basically make the MCU the way it was before, with all of the movies being the things that really interconnect with one another, and then the shows can be fun one-off adventures. And yes, they will take place in the MCU, so of course they'll be connected in that sense, but it sounds like they're going to make it to where they're not absolutely necessary for the overall story in the films. Now, as far as why Marvel suffered during this time where they were producing a lot of Disney Plus content, they talk about this in great detail in the article, and it all comes down to Kevin Feige. The article has a section titled Papa Feige. In this section, they talk about how great Kevin Feige has been at starting the MCU. Basically, building up to Avengers Endgame, and with Avengers Endgame, the studio really couldn't be touched, with of course its crowning achievement being in 2019 with Avengers Endgame, with it grossing $2.8 billion, a record at the time. But here's where the problem and the decline came in after that. They state during Marvel's heyday in the 2010s, Feige was heavily involved in the film development. He deployed lower-ranking executives to supervise shooting, then got his hands dirty again in the editing room, often making significant changes and ordering new scenes. And the movies were overseen by a small team of creative executives who came to be known as the Parliament. Most had been with the company since its founding or joined as assistants and were promoted, giving Marvel a family-like culture. And they state Feige was the studio's beloved and charismatic dad, a creative genius from whom everyone sought attention and approval. So it was working great before Endgame, but this is where the problem came. They say soon after Endgame, Marvel Studios started to work on what was next for the MCU. However, Disney was working on what would be best for Disney Plus to compete with Netflix.
So say that's their fault. Disney rely too much. I know, I understand because the pandemic and they're trying to make money, but for them just to rely, it's like, hey, we need stuff for Disney Plus. We need Marvel shows a lot fast, and that kind of was a big mistake because they relied to connect too much with the movies, which they should have just done standalone, not to focus like, hey, we understand they do connect, but they don't have to actually connect. That was their big mistake because, excuse me, Disney really want a lot of stuff for shows because looking now, Star Wars has a bunch of Star Wars shows, which I have never seen, just The Mandalorian, but I have not seen the rest because it is too much that they're adding stuff on Star Wars. I'm a big fan of Star Wars, but I'm only gonna watch just the movies, not the shows, because I feel like they probably change a lot of stuff, and that's what I hear. They're doing a lot too much stuff on it, so rather just watch the movie than the show.
Stating that Disney needed loads of new series for it, and they were counting on Marvel to provide many of them. The strategy became just expansion, 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 said a person who worked at Marvel at the time. Kevin Feige told colleagues that he agreed to the plan because of a zealousness to tell more stories and a desire to be an excellent corporate citizen. It turned out to be a mistake. The Wall Street Journal states that Marvel's transition from producing a few movie content annually to several dozen hours of streaming shows and films eventually broke down the studio's processes. A pair of executives oversaw each show, while Feige remained the final decision maker on every significant creative issue, even though there were exponentially more decisions to make each day. And here was the big problem. They state people who worked at Marvel in the early 2020s said it was challenging to secure enough time with Feige to get his feedback. As a result, they sometimes spent weeks on work that proved irrelevant once he weighed in, then found themselves with little time to implement his changes before a deadline. Desperate staffers resorted to chasing Feige in the halls to get answers. So basically what they are explaining here is that before, Kevin Feige used to look over everything. And that's because they used to only produce a few movies a year. And they actually show a graph here that shows what they produced prior to Disney Plus and then what they started to produce after. And as you can see here, it is so much more. So while Kevin Feige used to be able to look over everything, it quickly turned into he was basically looking at some things here and there, giving his input every now and then when the final product came, he demanded changes to make things better. But since there wasn't a lot of time, they really couldn't make all of the changes, and that definitely explains why the CGI for some things has been pretty sketchy. The team was asked to make changes with just not enough time to do it well. So the result was a lot of projects coming from Marvel Studios, all of which weren't the same quality that fans were used to. Which brings us to the next section titled Marvel Fatigue. They state, the internal dysfunction began to show in Marvel's output. Viewers complained that there was too much Marvel content to keep up with, and a growing proportionate of it felt subpar, with shows failing to attract new viewers, or even old viewers, with shows like Secret Invasion and Miss Marvel. And they state that in the theaters, Marvel's biggest hits were the nostalgia stories like Spider-Man No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine.
So yeah, the only reason I felt like Spider-Man No Way Home, Far From Home, and Deadpool and Wolverine did so amazing is because, well, of course, the cameos, because they brought in the classic Spider-Man, of course, Hugh Jackman. They brought him back in wearing his like iconic outfit. That's the only reason they made money, because everyone who grew up with those want to see them together with their MCU, and but no, they that's all they could have done, and the rest of like the shows they're relying that to make them for movies and as well. Not many old school Marvel fans and the new ones connected with them, because like they just said, they had to rely on their shows, and not everyone was always watching their shows or subscribed to Disney Plus. Like I'm not subscribed to Disney Plus, but I'll borrow my sister's account, but I'm still not interested in watching the show. The only time I watched the show was just Wanda and Loki, and that was it. The rest, I just saw a few episodes of Moon Knight and Falcon and Winter Soldier, and that was it. And the rest, I have not watched. I'm not really interested in watching their shows except for the Daredevil one. I still haven't started watching it. And of course, once they announced for the Punisher show, that's like the only main ones I'm really interested in watching. But like I said, if they do it correctly and they just do it away apart from like trying to connect so much with the movies, then I'll get into it. But if they rely too much in connecting with the movies and the show, and then we'll have to rewatch and stuff, and it's like, hey, I gotta remember this. This is gonna be in the movie and stuff. Then yeah, people are gonna not gonna get into it.
They then stated that they had a lot riding on Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and then it flopped. And then employees at Marvel started to talk regularly about Marvel fatigue. They worried that they had created a no new fans club in which people unfamiliar with the state of the MCU couldn't watch a new release because they'd have no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, Wall Street's obsession with streaming growth gave way to a focus on profitability, and Bob Iger and Kevin Feige began scrutinizing Marvel's costs and creative choices more closely. This led to them deciding that Blade's script was not good enough, and they scrapped the film, for now at least. But this is where things kind of started to change. Quantumania bombed, and then Kevin Feige decided to become more involved, hoping that the Marvels wouldn't bomb. But it became Marvel's biggest bomb ever. And this is where all of the big Marvel changes come in. Marvel and Feige's Parliament team has gone to a retreat every fall in Palm Springs. They would go and they would plan out the future of the MCU. And in 2023, it was basically the worst time that they've ever gone, with Marvel not being in such good shape. The TV shows weren't working, the movies weren't working, and the studio had just laid off employees for the first time in its history. From here, they talked about whether or not they could salvage their plans for Kang Dynasty, with Quantumania being such a bomb, and talked about a new TV strategy in which shows would have plots divorced from the MCU, making them easier for new fans to understand. And this led to a bunch of changes that Marvel Studios then made and are continuing to make now. They decided to cut back significantly on TV production, and Disney CEO Bob Iger even said, "Quantity in our case diluted quality," and Marvel has suffered greatly from that. And now they're only going to release 1 or 2 live-action streaming series annually, starting in 2026, with the goal of the new shows they introduce to have multiple seasons and not cross over onto the big screen. And the primary reason that they are doing this is so Feige can focus on the movies, and they're even going to have a senior executive overseeing television, which as far as we're concerned, I believe that is Brad Winderbaum, head of Marvel TV. Marvel's top priority is ensuring that the next 2 Avengers extend the track record of the franchise. So Marvel decided to brainstorm on how they could make Avengers Kang Dynasty better, and it just so happened that at that time, Kevin Feige had been talking to Robert Downey Jr. for more than a year about returning to the MCU to specifically play Doctor Doom. They just didn't know when or where he could return and appear in the MCU. But as they started to think about what to do for Kang Dynasty, they ultimately decided that Robert Downey Jr. was the solution to their so-called Avengers problem. So they changed Avengers Kang Dynasty to Avengers Doomsday and announced that Robert Downey Jr. would be returning to play Doom. And they don't mention this, but I'm sure the fact that Jonathan Majors got into all of the trouble that he did made it pretty easy to move away from Kang, on top of already beginning to think about moving away from Kang. Then on top of that, they hired the Russo brothers to come back for the next 2 Avengers films as well, stating that Kevin Feige likes to go back to people he trusts, particularly in moments of urgency.
See, I feel like this is gonna be another problem for Marvel. They think their solution has been saved by bringing Robert Downey Jr. For me, I don't think bringing Robert Downey Jr. is like a great decision, especially for him to be playing as Doctor Doom. I was expecting someone different, a different actor, but since they're saying it's a multi-universe, there's different version of Doctor Doom. So he's one of them, but we're gonna have a different Victor Von Doom, an actual Victor Von Doom, not a Tony Stark version of Doctor Doom. But in my opinion, I don't think it's still gonna be saved. They're so desperate to bring back their Marvel fans back, like to enjoy the movies and stuff, and I don't think that's gonna work out. That's my opinion. That's what I'm thinking, because they're really desperate, because they're bringing not just Robert Downey Jr., they're bringing Chris Hemsworth and so much other of the original X-Men and other casts from other classic Marvels that they think is gonna work out to bring them. I am interested how it's gonna work, but I'm not gonna be surprised if it bombs, because look at what Thunderbolt, it bombed. Captain America 4 bombed. I won't be surprised if Fantastic Four is gonna bomb. So they think they're bringing their fans back and they're bringing Marvel back, but in reality they're not. And I know their plans is to reboot everything of the franchise of Marvel after Secret Wars, but we'll see how that goes.
In moments of urgency, which I would definitely say that Marvel was in. So Marvel Studios has a completely new plan moving forward, and the article ends actually by stating, in many ways, Marvel has now reverted to its strategy from before the streaming boom, as if the past 5 years had been a bad dream. As he did when Marvel Studios started, Feige has an expansive vision for his company's big screen future. The upcoming Avengers movies are expected to introduce the X-Men, one of Marvel's most popular superhero teams, to the MCU. Feige has told colleagues he has a 10-year plan for the characters. So, huge news for us Marvel fans. Marvel Studios is basically going back to how they did it in the Infinity Saga. And the phrase, "in Feige we trust," does come to mind, because when Feige can directly oversee projects and give time to those projects, that's when they're good. And now Marvel Studios has a head of television to where Feige doesn't really have to be involved, which means now, and this is their plan, he can completely focus on movies. And this is going to make a really big difference for both TV and movies, because now Brad Winderbaum can make all the decisions for TV shows, and he can make them pretty much right away when they need to be made. This will lead to things not being done at the last minute, and the same thing goes for movies. Kevin Feige can be involved the entire time. So instead of the creative team working on something for weeks and then Kevin Feige coming in and saying, nope, that doesn't work, start over or do something else, that's not the case anymore. He can be with them when they begin and either say, yes, this is good, or no, it's not, let's go a different direction. This is going to really just improve the quality of all of the projects coming from Marvel Studios a ton. So their new strategy, combined with the X-Men now coming to our new universe after Secret Wars, and the Fantastic Four and whoever else they get to appear, is going to mean Marvel Studios is going to be at its very best after Avengers Secret Wars. But really, starting with the Fantastic Four and Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, that should be the best for Marvel Studios as well, because they're already doing their new plan. Feige has been way more involved with these projects than he's been in the last 5 years. So, hopefully, they are fantastic.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be. That's how it was supposed to go and all. But to me, I think it was just crazy that we're not gonna get King Dynasty. I was just hoping to see how the movie was gonna go with that first, and then Secret Wars, and then later on bring Doctor Doom. But with things happened, they changed it. But like I said, I'm sure they're planning to reboot everything after Secret Wars. Like they just said that Kevin Feige has a 10-year plan, especially with the X-Men characters. I just hope they do not ruin it. But I feel like they will ruin it. And plus, what else can they do? What other villains can they use after Secret Wars? Because are you going to repeat everything again, reboot everything, and start, okay, we're going to use Thanos again, we're going to use Kane, we're going to use Victor Von Doom, Galactus, and so many other villains that what else are you gonna do? Like he said, for his 10-year plan. What happens if it doesn't work out? Because look what happened with the pandemic, ruined his plan and all. How is it everything gonna work out? But like I said, it's just crazy to think he still has another 10-year plan for this. Especially if they're gonna reboot everything. Is of course once they reboot, I'm sure they're gonna bring back a newer version of Iron Man, newer Captain America, and newer of X-Men cast, because they're not gonna use this classic X-Men cast from the Fox version, because I'm sure they want younger versions so they could last more than 10 years to work on these 10 years plan of his. But we'll see how it goes, and that's all I got. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this. You think it's a good idea, bad idea? But other than that, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.